Welcome to the debate. Our focus today is on the Social Security Cost of Living Adjustment, the COLA, which was recently confirmed for January 2026 at 2.8%. This adjustment is obviously crucial for millions of beneficiaries, and its calculation method really brings a fundamental tension into sharp relief every single year.
It really does. I think the central question for us today is whether the Social Security Administration's mandated calculation method, which, relies exclusively on the Consumer Price Index for urban wage earners and clerical workers, or the CPIW, whether that represents a responsible, mathematically found approach to maintaining the system, or if it's just a fundamentally inadequate methodology that guarantees a long-term decline in what beneficiaries can actually buy.
And I'll be arguing that the 2.8% COLA, despite being, yes, modest compared to some recent years, is entirely justified. It adheres strictly to the existing legal framework, which is critical for system integrity, and, I think most importantly, sticking to that rule book is the only way to keep the books balanced and address the very severe, well-documented threats to the Social Security Trust Fund.
And I'll be taking the opposing view that the 2.8% COLA is simply insufficient because the metric itself is inherently flawed. The CPIW just does not accurately capture the rising costs that actual retirees face, and this leads to a demonstrable and I think quantifiable decline in their financial well-being.
Well, my position is that the process is sound precisely because it's based on prudence. The SSA calculates this adjustment very transparently. It's based on comparing the CPIW average from the third quarter of the prior year to this year's third quarter. So this 2.8% figure is the precise legal outcome of the inflation and wage growth we saw in that period. It's a calculation tied purely to established economic indicators, not, political stimulus. But we have to keep the larger picture in view here. The actuarial forecasts are grim. Larger, more generous COLAs, like the ones critics are demanding, would just accelerate the depletion of the trust fund. The SSA has to look ahead to the real possibility that on its current path, the fund may need to slash benefits by around 23% in 2033. So avoiding these over-generous adjustments today isn't punitive. It's just the necessary measure to protect the long-term viability of the entire system for all Americans.
I see that, but I come at it from a completely different perspective, one focused really on the recipient. And when you look at the outcome for the average fixed income retiree, the system is fundamentally failing its core mission, which is, to keep millions from sliding into poverty. A 2.8% boost is just not enough to offset the true specific inflation costs seniors face. The evidence against the CPIW is overwhelming. Senior advocacy groups confirm that recipients' purchasing power has declined by a staggering 36% since the year 2000. 36%, and 20% just since 2010. Those numbers aren't theoretical, they're the direct consequence of using the wrong yardstick. The CPIW is designed for urban wage earners and clerical workers. They have different spending habits. Alternatives like the CPIE, which is focused on costs for people 62 and older, are just continuously ignored because, they would incur higher payout costs, but they reflect reality. So when the average retired worker sees only about a $56 monthly increase, and that tiny gain is often immediately canceled out by the confirmed rise in Medicare Part B premiums for 2026, the COLA is little more than a wash.
Your focus on that purchasing power loss is compelling. I agree, but it brings us right to the core conflict, doesn't it? The sufficiency of the CPIW versus the, let's say, conceptual appeal of an alternative like the CPIE, which would inherently destabilize the system much faster.
See, I don't think the problem is the system's stability. It's the system's effectiveness. My argument is that while the math the SSA performs using the CPIW is technically correct, they are following the letter of the law. The application is functionally flawed. The metric is conceptually mismatched to the actual expenses of the retired population. And that is where that 36% purchasing power erosion comes from. Let's break down the CPIW's design. It's heavily weighted towards expenses like transportation, gasoline, apparel. things that are high priorities for a commuter, but far less significant for a senior on a fixed income. And conversely, it radically underweights the cost categories where inflation hits retirees the hardest: healthcare, specialized housing, and especially prescription drugs.
I understand the differential weighting, and it's a strong point that seniors face higher healthcare inflation. But let me offer a different perspective on why the CPIW is maintained. It is the existing, consistent legal standard. It links the adjustment to broad inflation and wage growth across the entire economy. If we change the metric to CPIE, which is, yes, inherently designed to yield larger COLAs, maybe an extra 0.5%, a full percent annually, the impact on the trust fund is immediate and severe. You're essentially asking the SSA to take a known fiscal constraint and turn it into a guaranteed accelerated systemic failure. So the immediate priority has to be extending the solvency timeline. If we switch to a more generous formula now, we just speed up that mandatory 23% cut in 2033, and that impacts everyone.
But the CPIW, by its very definition, fails to achieve the program's stated purpose of maintaining parity. So if we accept that the CPIE provides a more accurate reflection of costs for seniors, then continuing to use the CPIW just means we are consciously budgeting for inadequacy. If we are truly committed to the program's promise, then the financial structure, the taxation, the funding mechanism, that should be changed to accommodate an accurate measurement, rather than forcing the cost measurement to fit an outdated budget. By prioritizing solvency over adequacy, you are essentially asking the current generation of retirees to subsidize the failure of the system's funding.
And while that sounds morally compelling, the SSA cannot unilaterally restructure taxation. It has to operate within the constraints of current law, and its primary fiscal responsibility is managing that trust fund to avoid the 2033 cliff. Plus, we have to consider the overall package of adjustments. They're designed to offer some financial relief in other areas.
That's a good transition, because it's important to remember that the annual adjustment package does include some positive changes specifically for a growing portion of beneficiaries, those who are still working.
Precisely. We have to look at the package holistically, not just the COLA in isolation. So for 2026, the earnings limits for working beneficiaries have gone up substantially. And just to clarify the terminology here, for those getting benefits before their full retirement age, or FRA, which is 67 for most people now, they can earn up to $24,480 without penalty. But even more significantly, for those who reach their FRA during 2026, that limit has increased to $65,160. These changes allow beneficiaries to earn a lot more. The penalty is simple. For every $2 earned over that lower limit, $1 is temporarily withheld. This is an effective non-COLA mechanism that puts more money in the pockets of older workers.
That's an interesting point, but I would frame it differently. While increasing the earnings limits is certainly a benefit for the group of recipients who are still working, it does absolutely nothing to address the core financial instability for the largest group, the non-working retirees who rely solely on their benefits. For them, that relief is non-existent. In fact, you could argue that by making it easier for seniors to work, the SSA is implicitly acknowledging that the benefit alone is inadequate. It's almost an admission of failure. Furthermore, any financial relief from the COLA, that $56 for the average worker, it has to be viewed against the confirmed rise in Medicare Part B premiums. So for millions of seniors, especially those in lower income brackets, this creates a net zero or even a net negative outcome. The package isn't holistic if it leaves the most vulnerable members behind.
But that still demonstrates a kind of managerial agility. By raising the earnings cap, particularly that high $65,000 limit, the SSA is providing a real financial incentive for people to delay claiming or keep working. That effectively slows the rate at which trust fund assets are drawn down. It's a crucial solvency measure that doesn't rely on raising taxes or cutting the COLA directly. It's a pragmatic solution that addresses adequacy for those who are able to earn. The system, after all, is designed to provide a financial floor, not necessarily replace 100% of pre-retirement income.
And that brings us right back to the fundamental philosophical disagreement, doesn't it? Long-term system solvency versus immediate recipient needs.
I agree. We are at the crux of the issue.
You prioritize mitigating that 23% cut in 2033.
But isn't that, to some extent, just political scaremongering? That cliff is a product of political inaction on funding, not the benefit formula itself. We're accepting a 36% cumulative purchasing power cut now, a cut that's already happened, to avoid a hypothetical future cut that Congress still has 7 years to address. They could raise the cap on taxable earnings or just tax rates. So why should current, often very vulnerable recipients be forced to subsidize future solvency by accepting reduced purchasing power today? This just shifts the financial burden directly onto those who are least equipped to bear it and who are guaranteed by the program to receive an adjustment that keeps them whole. And the evidence shows it is failing to do that job.
That's a compelling argument about the role of Congress, but the SSA's mandate is clear. They have to manage the trust fund within the current legislative framework. They cannot rely on hypothetical future congressional action. So the SSA is focused on mitigating a catastrophic, legally mandated scenario, that 23% slash, by managing payouts now. The 2.8% COLA is calculated exactly as required, and experts can reasonably conclude that using the CPIW is the most responsible managerial choice to extend the life of the trust fund. The failure to use CPIE isn't ideological, it's a calculation of system survival. We just cannot sacrifice the program's viability for a future generation for a slight, temporary boost today that the system, under its current funding rules, simply can't afford.
But the goal of the COLA is explicit: to ensure benefits maintain equal purchasing power year over year. If the CPIW is being chosen because it yields a lower increase and slows depletion, then the COLA is no longer an adjustment. It's a mechanism of slow-motion benefit reduction. And the 20% purchasing power drop since 2010 just confirms this. The system is objectively failing its stated mission. We are sacrificing the mandate of the program adequacy for the mechanism of the program, the trust fund's longevity.
And yet, managing the system is a function of law and fiscal responsibility. Beneficiaries will automatically receive their mandatory payments starting in January 2026. While the amount may feel low, it represents a calculated increase based on empirical data, and it's a necessary part of a package, including those earnings limit adjustments, aimed at maximizing the duration of the program, protecting the overall safety net for as long as possible. The CPIW, despite its flaws, is the instrument of fiscal responsibility in the current legal landscape.
And that legal landscape guarantees the system's failure to protect purchasing power.
So I think we have established that the 2026 COLA of 2.8% is derived from a transparent, if yes, conservative calculation method in the CPIW. We've shown that adhering to this existing method is directly tied to managing the very real concern of trust fund depletion and avoiding those potential 23% mandatory cuts looming in 2033. From a fiscal and administrative viewpoint, the system is functioning exactly as it was designed to mitigate future institutional risk.
I'm just not convinced by that line of reasoning. This exclusive focus on a theoretical future solvency comes at the direct, verifiable expense of present-day beneficiaries, which is evidenced by that significant long-term erosion of purchasing power. The debate really hinges on whether the COLA mechanism should primarily prioritize the fiscal stability of the institution or the practical, documented financial needs of current retirees who rely on those payments to keep pace with their specific, often highly medicalized cost of living.
I think both perspectives illuminate some critical, evidence-based trade-offs that are just inherent in this annual adjustment process. The material clearly demonstrates that managing a program of this scale requires balancing accurate economic measurement, practical financial relief, and, of course, long-term fiscal responsibility. The SSA is really forced to choose between two difficult options: a financially sustainable but arguably inadequate COLA, or an adequate COLA that accelerates the trust fund's collapse. There is clearly much more to explore in the material regarding whether a legislative change to the COLA index is even possible without simultaneously addressing the funding mechanisms.